Hi, I'm Tony. Welcome to Sports Bike Shop's review of the Rev'it Trench 2 Gore-Tex jacket. The styling of this new jacket from Rev'it is very understated and the features are simpler than on many textile jackets, but the spec level of the Trench 2 is still quite high. Rev'it describe it as a jacket that brings adventure riding functions to the commuting rider, and I'd personally say they're about right with that. Equally, I think you could say this brings commuter styling and simplicity to the touring rider, as I see no reason really why this jacket couldn't do both of those jobs. And at a list price of 500 quid for a jacket with a laminated Gore-Tex membrane, we're actually looking at quite impressive value for money. Okay, let's run through the details and what I found when I wore this jacket out on the road. The outer shell is made from 600 denier nylon, and there's that Gore-Tex membrane that I mentioned, which is laminated to the outer. Having it laminated to the shell means the jacket won't get as wet as one with the membrane sat loosely on the inside. It'll also be much faster to dry out completely after a wet ride, and that's important for tourers and commuters, as putting a wet jacket back on is actually pretty grim. This runs a 2-layer Gore-Tex membrane rather than the 3-layer version. In a 2-layer laminate, the membrane itself is very marginally thicker than the membrane used in 3-layer Gore-Tex and also very slightly less breathable. But I find that losing that 3rd layer makes a 2-layer jacket like this more flexible and also comfier to wear. On top of that, it's also cheaper. Most 3-layer Gore-Tex laminated jackets sit around the £1,000 mark, not £500 like this one. I wore this jacket for a couple of days out on the road. The weather was quite nasty, but the Trench 2 shrugged it all off and it was bone dry by the time I got home. There's another benefit as well to laminated membranes like this, and that's with the ventilation. On a traditional jacket, you can open up a vent and there's still a waterproof membrane layer that's blocking that air's path to your skin. On a jacket like this one, opening the vents gets the Gore-Tex out of the way completely, and it means air can flow directly through to the inside. Opening the chest zips and then pulling the flaps back and securing them with the clever magnetic fidlock fasteners gives a very large air intake at the chest. I wore this jacket when it was around 12 degrees Celsius outside, and that's a great time for testing the effectiveness of vents, but at the same time it's terrible with a jacket like this for leaving those vents open for very long at all. The chest vents are the only vents on this Trench 2, so there's nothing at the back to allow air to be dragged through and out of the back of the jacket. If you feel you're going to need something like that, then I would take a look at the Rev'it vertical jacket, which is very similar to this one, but has a bit more of a touring spec. A link to our review of that should be popping up on the screen now. The main fastener for the jacket is a zip with the gutted storm flap that secures over the top with Velcro, and then at the neck there's a poppered collar with a choice of 2 studs for a tighter or more relaxed fit. Now, higher spec Rev'it jackets have that stud on a sliding plate, which gives more control over the fit, and they also have a snapback stud, which gives you some air around the throat if you want it. This jacket has a more stripped back design, so again, I would take a look at the vertical if things like that are important to you. The cuffs on this jacket are simple Velcro closures, and I found there was plenty of room here to get gloves in the inside, winter gloves, and also I could tighten this cuff really easily over the top. Fit adjustment comes through sliding belts at the forearm, which gives a good secure seal against wind getting into the sleeves, and then there are also poppered belts at the waist. And there's also an elasticated drawstring at the bottom hem to pull that tight and block out drafts. So last things last with the exterior, pockets. The biggest ones are these at the waist, and they secure with magnets, which makes them very easy to use, and Rev'it describe those as waterproof, which is handy. There's no pocket at the lower back on this jacket, but there is a small pocket on the left sleeve for things like cards or toll tickets. The most important pocket for me on this jacket is the Napoleon pocket, which sits just behind the storm flap. I like that because I can get to it without unzipping the jacket, and it's also been big enough to hold my wallet and my phone. Okay, moving to the inside, the first layer that we reach is the thermal liner. This adds a really nice touch of warmth. When I wore this jacket at around 12 degrees Celsius, I just had a summer base layer underneath, and I was quite comfortable for an hour at a time. The thermal liner's got a raised collar as well. I normally hate having too much material around my neck when I'm riding, but this gave me no trouble at all. It just provided a bit of extra warmth. There's one large pocket on the thermal liner, which fastens with a single popper. Now, Rev'it say on their website that this layer is a destination layer that can be worn separately to save you carrying another jacket in your luggage. I think that information's a bit out of date. Personally, I know I'm a long way from a fashionista, but even I wouldn't be seen in public wearing just that thermal layer. My dad probably would, but that's a different story. If you pull that thermal liner out, then we get to the mesh lining, where there are 2 zipped pockets. Both of those pockets have Velcro strips at the top. If you open those, then those are the entry points for optional chest armour, which costs £32. A back protector is an option as well. A Rev'it insert's £42 or £46 as we record this, depending on how well ventilated you want that insert to be. The armour that you do get is at the shoulders and elbows, and it is good stuff. It passes the CE impact protection tests at the higher level 2. including optional tests to show that it still works at high and low temperatures, and it's also marked as Type B, so it covers more of the body than standard Type A protection. It's C-Flex armour, which is soft and comfortable, and it remained very low profile when I wore this jacket. Overall safety protection for the Trench 2 is CE AA, which is the middle of 3 levels available. Now the final thing with the inside, the method of connecting the jacket to trousers. You get both a short and long zip, so you can easily connect this to Rev'it trousers. It's not immediately obvious which trousers match this jacket, but I would personally suggest the Rev'it Vertical, as they're laminated 2-layer Gore-Tex and they've got a simple style that will match this jacket nicely. Okay, let's talk about sizing. The Trench 2 comes in sizes from small to triple extra large. That takes you from a 40-inch chest up to a 50-inch chest. I normally wear whatever size matches up to a 40-inch chest, which in Rev'it's case would be a small if you went from their size chart. But for this jacket I wore a medium, which Rev'it say is a 42-inch chest, and I would say it fits me just about right. Sometimes a medium-sized Rev'it jacket can be a little bit baggy on me, but not in this instance. By the time I put a force field back protector on underneath, the fit was actually quite snug. There's no women's version available for this jacket. The closest in the Rev'it women's range is their Lamina. That's got a 2-layer laminated construction like this jacket, but it's got a lighter outer shell and it is a little bit more casual in styling. It's also more expensive. It's £680. And that brings me to price. The Rev'it Trench 2 has a list price as we record this of £499.99. That makes it the cheapest jacket on our site with a laminated Gore-Tex membrane. If you add a pair of vertical trousers for £440, then it's £940 for the complete set. And that's less than many jackets alone if you go for top-end 3-layer laminated Gore-Tex. For people who ride all day in all weathers a lot, then the extra outlay for that might be worth it. 3-layer is more effective than 2-layer at weatherproofing in my experience. But for normal commuting and touring from spring to autumn, then I think 2-layer Gore-Tex is ideal. I'm quite a fan of this jacket, I've got to say. It's subtle, it's simple, it's very effective, it looks good, and it comes at what I think is a very reasonable price. I hope that tells you everything you wanted to know about the Rev'it Trench 2 Gore-Tex jacket, but if there is anything you'd like to ask or to add, then please pop a comment below. Thanks for watching.